performance of how Ronald Reagan ended the Cold War. For just over 4 decades, between 1945 and 1989, the two greatest superpowers that this world has ever known were engaged in war. Not a war that involved troops, torpedoes, or tanks. This war did not involve heated battle. Therefore, in its rightful name, the Cold War. Each side had enough nuclear weapons to destroy planet Earth numerous times. Your parents and your parents' parents lived through much of this war. They feared the day that either side would send a missile over to the other, triggering a mutually assured destruction of both nations, and all human life. The Cold War was not fought. The Cold War was a threatening match. It was much like two people pointing a gun at each other. Neither will shoot, but neither will lower their weapon for fear that the other will shoot. For close to 40 years now, 7 presidents have gone through the Oval Office and had failed to put an end to this time of fear. In 1979, ex-Hollywood actor and former governor of California, Ronald Reagan, had ran for president and won. Just 90 days into his presidency, though, someone had shot him in the chest while leaving the Washington Hilton Hotel. He had survived, but just barely. He began to think to himself in the Oval Office. Ever since I was shot as president, I felt that God had spared my life. I feel as though I have a bigger purpose on this planet. Ever since 1966, when I spoke at the Republican National Convention, it has been my duty to bring about an end to the Cold War. It feels like the time is right. Maybe the Soviet form of communism is just like some of the trees you may find in the forest. At first they may look big and intimidating, but on the inside, termites have been eating at it for years. Maybe all this tree needs is a not-so-gentle push, and it will come tumbling down. The Soviets are facing economic collapse. How can I put this to our advantage? I believe in my heart that the Soviet form of communism is bad and wrong for their people. If I believe this, then why should I mince the words? Why shouldn't I come right out and say it? So in your discussions of nuclear-free proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blindly declaring ourselves above it all, and to label each side equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, and to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil. I've called them out. I've called them medieval empire. But what now? What can I do now? I recall my military advisors telling me of a concept that they had for shooting down incoming missiles before they could reach their destination. What was it that they called it again? Wasn't it Strategic Defense Initiative? What if I were to say that I was going to fund this program? It may be years before we have this type of technology available, maybe never, but the Soviets don't know that. In this time of an arms race, this may be just what we need to either bankrupt them or to get them to sign a disarmament accord. I clearly recognize that our defense systems have limitations and raise certain problems and ambiguities. When paired with offensive systems, they can be viewed as fostering an aggressive policy, and no one wants that. But with these considerations firmly in mind, I call upon the scientific community in our country, those who gave us nuclear weapons, to just turn their great talents now to the cause of mankind and world peace, to give us the means of rendering these nuclear weapons impotent and obsolete. Gotta love that press. I call for a Strategic Defense Initiative, and they give me a better name to scare the Soviets with, without even knowing they were helping me. They labeled it Star Wars after the box office hit movie of the past 6 years. The year now is 1985, and I've won a 2nd term as president. This is good, seeing I haven't yet reached my goals to put about an end to the Cold War, but the 1st term was also successful. I ended an air traffic controller strike, turned the economy around, and we're seeing great growth. I just wish we didn't have a national debt growing so large. But now, the Soviets need my full attention. I like this new General Secretary of Communist Party. It seems like I could reach out to him and discuss arms reduction.
Get me Gorbachev, please.
Hello, Mr. General Secretary Gorbachev. Congratulations on your new position. It is refreshing for my country to see a Soviet leader focusing on reconstructing the Soviet Union. What is the Russian word you give to this? Isn't it perestroika? I would like to meet with you personally to see how we can improve Soviet-U.S. relations. Would neutral Geneva, Switzerland work for you? Fantastic. I am looking forward to it. Our strongest ally, Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of England, tells me that he thinks this Gorbachev is a man who we could do business with. And my most loyal and trusted advisor and wife, Nancy, likes this Gorbachev fellow and thinks he could help us reach mutual disarmament. So now we have an ally in the highest office of the Soviet Union. Now we need to work on the people. We're already seeing a cultural revolution in Eastern European countries. I know the Soviets cannot be that far behind. I know they see our freedom and long for it. How can I give this tree yet another nudge? It's time for this old actor and great communicator, as they are calling me in the press, to give these Soviet people a show. I like collecting stories that I have actually proved are told among the Russian people. They make them up themselves, they tell them amongst themselves, and it reveals that they have a great sense of humor, but also a very cynical attitude towards things in their country. Anyway, one of these stories, the one I'm going to tell you, I also told to Gorbachev. And he laughed! Anyway, the story was an American and a Russian were arguing about their two countries. The American said, look, I can go into the Oval Office, pound the president's desk, and say, Mr. President, I don't like the way you're running our country. The Russian said, I can do that. The American said, you can? The Russian said, yes, I can go into the General Secretary's office, pound his desk, and say, Mr. General Secretary, I don't like the way President Reagan is running his country. Now I have them where I want them. It's time to go in for the kill. It's time to help Gorbachev by getting his people to feel his embarrassment and his oppressive policies, by coming right out and asking that he end the Cold War by getting rid of its biggest symbol. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, Mr. Gorbachev, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Embarrassed, broke, and seeing that there was an American leader reaching out to them, the Soviets, with their new leader, Mr. Gorbachev, entered a new era of glasnost, or openness. In 1989, George H.W. Bush assumed office and continued relations with Gorbachev. After a series of treaties and arms reductions, the Cold War had definitely cooled. Debate and diplomacy are generally assumed to require compromise between two parties. Reagan stood firm in his belief that the United States was in the right. He gave no compromise. He used creative tactics to resolve this issue. He used humor, bluffs, and stood behind strong principles. This event in history is a great example of diplomacy. The world's two greatest superpowers seem to be locked in a stalemate, neither side willing to blink. Ronald Reagan got both sides to lower their weapons without a shot ever being fired. Thank you very much. Again, I really appreciate you guys coming here and watching this. It's great practice for me, and well, thank you very much for your time. So.